Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at one of the basic classes, of the four food groups, as we always call them at our table, of AD&D, which are the Cleric, the Fighter, the Thief, and the Magic User. Those are the four basic food groups. That goes back to late 70s, early 80s food pyramid stuff. But those are the four basic classes from AD&D. The other classes are primarily offshoots of those. There's a few exceptions to that. I'm looking at you, monks. But today we're going to go to the Player's Handbook, and we're going to take a look at the Cleric. The Cleric, nobody wants to play the Cleric. Well, yeah, maybe you should. I'm going to talk about what's in the Player's Handbook and a little bit of some house rules and things like that we've come up with to make the Cleric a little more attractive to play. And honestly, I have two active Clerics at my table right now, actually both played in different campaigns by the same player, and one of the Clerics is doing quite well. So actually both are doing very well. So we're going to take a look at the Cleric today from the Player's Handbook. I'm not really going to go into a lot of other stuff. I might mention a spell or two from other things. We're going to take a look at a few of the spells, but again, the spells are not going to get an in-depth look today. Today's going to be a look at the class. So today on page 121, the Cleric. The Cleric. Nobody wants to play the Cleric. They're just a MASH unit, Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. That term was popularized in early D&D, primarily because the show MASH was still on the air and very popular. So we're going to take a look at the Cleric. First, I'm going to throw another appeal out. Hey, subscribers, come on in. People who've already subscribed, thank you very much. I appreciate it. But I'm looking to grow the channel, and to do that, I need subscribers. Still well over half of my views come from non-subscribers. So come on, you've been watching a little bit here and there. Just come on in. Go ahead and subscribe. And you might find that you like some of the stuff I present. Also, I've got a Patreon going. If you could take a look at that and help out, I'd still like to improve some of my equipment. But for that, I need a little capital. So that's the end of the pitch. Today, we're back on the topic at hand, Clerics. So they're much more than a mobile army surgical hospital. They don't have to be only support and healing. They can be much, much more. So first, we're going to take a look at the class itself as presented in the Player's Handbook. It's the very first of the classes. And in the PHB, it talks about how their primary attribute is wisdom. You need a high wisdom to be an effective Cleric. You start getting bonus spells also for high wisdom. We grant spells in the exact same manner for MUs with high intelligence as we do Clerics with high wisdom. So if you have a wisdom of 18, as you gain each of these spells, you would gain an extra 2 first level, 2 second level, a third, and a fourth. So it's pretty important to have a good wisdom. You want to have, in my opinion, I wouldn't even be a Cleric if I had less than a 16. They also give you saving throws. A 16 would give you a +2 saving throw versus mind-affecting spells. So pretty effective. So it talks here about how Clerics of 15 wisdom or higher, or greater than 15, so 16 or higher, gain 10% on their experience points. So they progress 10% faster than their less wise brethren. And it recommends high ability scores in strength and constitution. You want at least, you'd like a 16 in this constitution as a Cleric, because that gets you +2 points per level, which is the max you can have as a non-fighter. It admits right here, it bears certain resemblance to religious order of knighthoods in medieval times. That's basically what these are, the Legends of the Warrior Clerics. You get an 8-sider for your hit points, and you have good combat tables and nice saving tables. So it's a solid class. You can wear a variety of armor and use a variety of weapons for no other reason than because it says here you can't use edged weapons. They are forbidden to use edged and or pointed weapons which shed blood. I always thought that was a silly rule. For the first couple of years, we did play by that rule. Then the Dragon Magazine came out with the excellent God articles that I've covered in different places on the channel, and looking at the different clergies, and it made no sense that a Cleric of Odin, for instance, Odin wields a spear, why the Cleric of Odin couldn't use a spear. And the articles did call that into question, and so we adopted it at our table in about 82 or 83, that Clerics can use a weapon that imitates what their deity uses. So if the deity is known to use a sword, the Cleric can use a sword. If the deity uses a spear, the Cleric can use a spear. If they use a hammer, like Thor, then they use a hammer. So it's really dictated by their who they're following rather than by one line in the cleric write-up. The idea behind the no edged weapons for the cleric, if you look at AD&D, edged weapons do the best damage. They didn't want the cleric being just a sub fighter, so they went ahead and they weakened that end of it a little bit and gave them weapons that actually yield less damage. I understand the rationale, but I don't agree with it. So we tossed that out a long time ago. So you at my table, you wield the weapon that your deity wields. If your deity has archery, if your god uses archery, a bow and arrow as his primary weapon, you can indeed use that. And you can even specialize in our game, and I'm going to explain that in a minute too. Turning undead. Well, yep, one of the main powers that clerics have is the ability to turn undead. And here it gives us a list out of the Monster Manual, which is the only book existent at the time of this printing, and shows us how you can turn them. You stand and present your holy symbol forcefully and say, back foul creatures, and off they go. I like that. I've always liked turning, or if you're evil and they're evil undead, you can command them into service. I've always really enjoyed that about the AD&D cleric, and it's one aspect that got me to play the cleric over the years. Here we have, they're good in combat, and they have good saving throws, very similar to fighters, especially at the lower levels. Their combat table changes every 3 levels instead of every 2 like a fighter. You can use most magic items except ones that are expressly forbidden to clerics. And then, of course, non-edged, non-pointed weaponry is called out here, but I've already discussed that. You can use all forms of magical armor and magic shields too. And then when you get to 8th level, you begin to attract followers. At 9th level, you begin to construct a temple or a church, depending on what it is. Then we look at the cleric's progression table. Notably, there is no level title for 5th level. That's a typo, but I like it. It's just fun. It's part of what we've always done. Clerics progress pretty quickly. It's only 1,501 to go to 2nd level and only 3,001 to 3rd level. So clerics are going to go up pretty quickly, and they're going to kind of be one of the leaders. They and thieves are going to be the fastest progressing characters, and clerics ultimately are more powerful in game terms than a thief. And here, of course, are the spells that you get. 1 first level at 1st level, 2 first level at 2nd level. Keeping in mind, if you have a wisdom of, say, 16, you'd be getting 3 first level and 4 first level at 2nd level. So the higher wisdom is very important, especially as you progress. Once you hit 7th level, with an 18 wisdom, you would have 5 first level, 5 second level, 3 third, and 2 4th level spells. That's an appreciable difference. Now we're going to take a quick look at cleric spells. A lot of people malign the cleric spells. Oh, they're no good. They're terrible. The only thing you can do is heal. Wrong. There are other spells. Now, I admit, offensively, cleric spells are not terribly good. One of their early ones is the command spell. A 1-segment casting time for a duration of 1 round. It affects 1 creature. You can give a command to the creature, and it has to be clear. In other words, you could say die and cause the creature to fall into a faint or cataleptic state for 1 round. Thereafter, the creature would be alive and well. Typical command words are back, halt, flee, run, stop, fall, fly, go, leave, surrender, sleep, rest, etc. Now, it's interesting because the spell itself has a 1 round duration. In the early days, I had some players argue that if I said stop and the creature stopped and then it came forward, well, he'd fulfilled the command. He stopped, but now he can progress. And my answer to that had been, as a GM or DM and as a player, was, wait a minute, it's a 1 round duration. He has to stop for the round. Eventually at our table, after a lot of discussion, we agreed that it's 1 round. So then we came up with a couple more interesting commands. One of my personal favorites is exhale. You have to exhale for an entire round. Another good one is inhale. You have to inhale for an entire round. Hop is a popular one at our table, as is eat. You have to stop what you're doing and start eating food. Just some fun you can have with command. Creatures that are not, they have 12 intelligence or under 6 hit dice, do not get a saving throw versus this spell. It's a great low-level spell, and it's still got its uses when you go up in level. Now let's look at Cure Light Wounds. Cure Light Wounds, okay, it's good. It's touch, 5-segment casting time. It heals 1 to 8 points of damage. Any kind of injury that you've taken will heal 1 to 8. We throw an 8-sider. The DM always throws the 8-sider. Healing will not affect creatures without corporeal bodies, will not affect not living creatures, except later iterations of the game have said, not iterations, but later rulings in the game have said if a creature is undead that's hit with Cure Light Wounds, that actually causes damage. And we've allowed that. So if you're fighting a zombie and for whatever reason you've only got this spell, you could hit the zombie with a Cure Light Wounds and strip out 1 to 8 points of damage. The spell is also reversible. You can cause light wounds. You have to have chosen that when you got the spell from your deity. You can't change it on the fly. And the deity then allows you to cause light wounds at 1 die 8 against somebody that would normally be cured by Cure Light Wounds. So it has to be a corporeal creature. You can actually heal an undead with a cause light wounds at our table. So some interesting stuff. You could use, for instance, a heal, just in its regular form as a heal. You could use that to harm a higher level undead like a vampire or a lich. They lose all but 1 die 4 hit points. So just an interesting counter there. So now the only other one I'm really going to touch on today, I've touched on the healing in general. I want to touch on the only other one we've changed, not changed, but we've made rulings on at the table. Come on, sorry, I went too far. Here we go to Blade Barrier. Very popular one at my table. I use this as a DM, as a player, and I've had my players use it many times. 9-segment casting time. That's a long time. It lasts 3 rounds a level. That's good. And the Cleric employs the spell to set up a wall of circling, razor-sharp blades. These whirl and flash in endless movement around an immobile point. Any creature which attempts to pass through the Blade Barrier suffers 8 die 8 hit points of damage doing so. The barrier remains for 3 rounds per level of the caster and can cover indoor 20 by 20 foot and then outdoor 60 by 60. We don't use the multiply by 3 rule. So it's only 20 by 20 area. But that's pretty interesting because it states right here that it is immobile, which is always an important thing. I've had some players try to cast it and then move with it. And it says they are blades. So you are calling into existence blades. So one of the questions we had at our table many times, hey, I have magic resistance. I get a check against this. And my answer to that is no, you don't. It says it actually calls up blades. So the sword, the spell itself is calling up the blades, and then the blades are set whirling. Therefore, you don't get any kind of MR against it. And I had one player who decided, well, I'm a cavalier. I'm going to parry the blades and walk through the barrier unharmed. To that, I said, interesting idea. And I gave him a reduction of like 1 die 4 damage because he was able to parry 1 or 2 of the blades. But it says that whirl and flash and endless movement. So any blade that he stops, another sprung up. So I ruled that he would not be able to parry the blades to step through the blade barrier. So just a couple of interesting calls at our table. One other thing I want to talk about in house rules, I've talked about this a little bit in other videos, is we do allow clerics to gain weapon specialization. They can only take this in their deity's prime weapon. So in other words, they can only have it when the deity is, if he uses a hammer like Thor or a spear like Odin, that's the only weapon they can specialize in. Starting at 5th level, the cleric can get single specialization with one exception I'll get to in a minute. That single specialization grants him a +1 attack, +2 damage, and 3 to 2 attacks per round. That's pretty powerful actually at 5th level. And then at 9th, he can go to double specialization, which is +3, +3. It doesn't affect the number of attacks per round. It was just something we felt we should do to bolster the cleric a little bit. They're not very popular at our table. Several have been played, and as I said, 2 are active in my campaigns right now, and both are doing very well. But it was a way to kind of entice people to play clerics, and it's proven to be pretty popular at a table. The exception, I said, is if you end up with a cleric who follows a deity who uses a bow as their primary weapon, we do allow bow specialization as written, and we allow that to happen at 5th level. It's the only exception we allow, but we felt that there's no way to single specialize in bow specialization. You either have it or you don't. So we just give bow specialization starting at 5th level if you're a cleric and you worship a deity whose primary weapon is a bow. if they use a sword and a bow interchangeably, I would really have to see how you played the character for 4 levels as to whether I'd let you go ahead and use the bow as your primary weapon. I'd also read the write-up and see what the books say about the deity. So that's all I've got today. I just want to take a look at one of the primary classes, one of the primary colors, again, as we used to call them in D&D. I will be taking a look at pretty much all the other classes over time, no particular order. I've already taken a look, I believe, at the Druid and the Bard. So I'm just going to keep going until I've basically covered everything out of this book, and then we'll go ahead and we'll hit some of the other books. So that's all I've got today for page 121. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. Please remember the Patreon, and I'll see you next time on page 121.